Lynne Howard.
And we are making our 5.2 Dropbox assignment for Cultural Context of Ministry for Dr. Elizabeth Drury. The assignment had us reading out of Divided by Faith. And so the first question just says, according to the authors, what is racialized society? And it talked a lot about white evangelicals being interviewed about how they viewed racial problems. But the book also really talked about how our media portrays race. And in the media, it tends to show white people as like, you live in suburbs and you have perfect lives and there's nothing wrong with you. And then anytime it's showing someone who lives in poverty, it's someone of a different race. It's not a white person. And anytime that there's like crime and like really bad stuff going on, it's always something that's racially tense and just someone of a different race. So it's like the media like puts that into our head. And even with Ferguson, and the Baltimore thing that's going on, Lynne and I were talking about like how many times has something like that happened where it was a white cop or and a white criminal or like a black cop. And until 2 years ago or a year ago, we never heard of anything so crazy happening and it getting out of hand, but I'm sure that things had happened like that before, and it wasn't racially tense, so it didn't blow up in the media. So we really think that the racialized society has a lot to do with how the media portrays everything.
We've both lived in different areas of the country, and we've lived in the Deep South and the farm towns in the Midwest. And I live in metropolitan Atlanta now, and it's even very racially. It's very racialized even here, just because there's so many different types of people and different races, and I think that the media definitely contributes to that.
Yeah. So you want to do the next question?
Yeah, the next question is, in what ways is claiming colorblindness counterproductive? And I do think that it's counterproductive to say, oh, I don't see different races, everyone looks the same to me, because there is so much history with segregation, and there's so much racial tension in the world, and to say that you don't see that kind of downplays all the things that the different races have been through, and it just makes it seem like there are not other races, and there really are. So it is hard to say, I don't see race, I'm colorblind, everyone looks the same to me. Because different cultures have different things that are important to them, and people, people are different. We're not all the same.
Yeah, and it makes me think of the Peggy McIntosh reading that we did earlier in the week, and how she was saying that all the colors are like a masterpiece, like a painting, and you can't just ignore that. You can't just think that you see like an all one color painting. It's all beautiful, and you can't be colorblind to that. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that. In your opinion, why does talking about race or ethnicity become difficult or volatile, and why is it difficult or not for you to talk about race or ethnicity personally?
Good question.
Yeah. Well, Lynne had mentioned earlier, like both of us lived in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, like in the Deep South. And I lived in Jasper, Alabama for a little bit, which is really like in the heart of some racial tension that happened a long time. Well, it's still happening, but like there were things that happened in Birmingham a really long time ago that still affect families of different races, and blacks and whites in particular, because of things that happened in Birmingham. And I think we both grew up in Indiana and then moved to Alabama, and we just felt like people were way more angry against people of a different color in the South. I kind of felt like that.
Mm-hmm. But it was definitely more prominent in the South. It was more like the racial tensions and the separation and all that.
Yeah, I mean, and so for us, like talking about that, like people didn't really talk about it in the South, and so like I think both of us, we are pretty open-minded, and we try not that we try to be colorblind, we just like try to treat everybody as individual, or like as people who are loved by God and made,
Yeah.
by Him. And so because of all these racial prejudices in the South, it was difficult, like, to have conversations with other people, I think, who might have felt, because people felt way more strongly about things, racial issues, than we did when we moved down there.
And even like the church that we went to in Alabama, the pastor would try to push diversity and try to talk about it. He wasn't from the South; he was actually from Canada, but so way up north. But people didn't really take hold of it and weren't interested in diversity. But here in Metro Atlanta, where I live now, it's diverse. You don't have to try to push it. There's a lot of different ethnicities, a lot of different races in our church. And it's not awkward really to talk about. It's not difficult to talk about races. It's not difficult to talk about the differences in races and the issues and the tensions. But it was definitely difficult in Alabama.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to go to the last one since we're already over 5 minutes, but we're talking about how the organization and structure of the church contribute to the problem of racialization. Mm-hmm. We were just talking about how the socioeconomic differences that happen in a church sometimes play a part, because I've seen in my church in Marion, Indiana, that most of our congregation is like upper middle class, almost all white, and so like we have multiple experiences with churches who like really want to be diverse, mm-hmm. and like how do we do that? And I almost think it's more of a socioeconomical thing for Marion, Indiana, at least. It's not like that everywhere.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too. I wrote in my last paper about the experience starting a Hispanic ministry in a white upper class church, and how the Hispanic people would show up without filling out the registration forms, and they didn't pack diaper bags for their kids, and they were different from the American families, and my volunteer team really had to learn how to be flexible and how to understand their culture. And I think it takes understanding and it takes courage in stepping out to reach different people groups and different cultures, and not even just different races, because it's not always just the skin color, but it's the socioeconomic changes, differences, and the cultural differences that we really need to think about as a church and how we structure our ministries.
And that's all.